Hey everyone, Scott here. Well, more retrofitting. Still retrofitting, same retrofitting, and all kinds of weirdness in this wonderful episode which I'm about to present to you. Anyway, now that I'm done being cheesy, you can take a look at what I've attempted here. If you remember from the last episode here, I was trying to build some grinding arms that would more or less sort of eat ships as I was approaching them or overtaking them. And this was further an attempt along those lines. Right now I've actually got a seat built on the bottom half of the Sevastopol ship, looking up. So orientation's a little weird here, it might be, but as you can see here, I had some limited success with this idea. Again, a lot of weird physics instability tended to crop up, or weird, just general weirdness. I assume it has to do with the physics of the game, or either desyncing issues or something along those lines. Keep in mind though that this is also sped up 2 times footage, so this violent shaking wasn't quite as bad as it was when I was actually playing, but it just does sort of illustrate some of the issues I was running into. I was trying to use sensors on these arms to try to control what they did a little bit more. Again, didn't quite work as well as I'd hoped. I had issues with it not grinding things up properly, or bouncing around, or getting away from me, and it was just generally a very inefficient system. But hey, you play, you figure it out, you learn, right? I even tried using the tugger ship that we've got down there to hold it in place while I was trying to use this, and that would kind of sprout another idea a little bit later that I had, but we'll get more into that as we go. But as it stands right now, this system is not usable, in my opinion. It worked, but it didn't work well enough, and I wasn't happy with it. As you can see, that little shot there, the tugger coming flying straight at me, was one of those physics issues that we ran into. I don't know if it grabbed onto my ship or what, but as you can see here, it says it's still hooked onto something, and it looks like there's a little wee piece of metal or something it grabbed that then slammed into what was left of that hulk of a ship, of that old mine layer that we captured. Anyway, it's just things like that kind of irked me. Maybe in a later release of Space Engineers, when some of these issues are fixed, these issues will no longer be issues. That's a lot of issues. Anyway, now that I'm done repeating the word issue, we can get back to it. Did have a lot of fun with this idea, though. Just turns out it wasn't going to work. And keep in mind that I'm actually publishing this video probably about 2 weeks after we actually had this playthrough, in an attempt to try to make sure my content is fairly regular. I have a couple of videos stored now so that if something drastically happens, I have more than a couple of days to find a solution to it. So I don't go into some of the issues I've had with some of my other videos. Nevertheless, kind of focusing on that. This idea has merit, but I'll have to revisit it at another time, or maybe in a different sort of format. In this current situation, I don't think it was stable enough or practical enough to really work. So nevertheless, I decided to take a break from that problem and kind of focus on some of the other parts of the Sevastopol. It needed power upgrades, because when I took it out for a test boot in the last episode, I was overloading the engine, or overloading the reactors. So I've upgraded to some azimuth fusion reactors, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the more powerful reactors that you can get without being quote-unquote overpowered. I know that's kind of a subjective thing that a lot of people can argue about what is overpowered. For me, if it gets a little too far from the abilities of the vanilla game without a cost, then I consider it overpowered. So in this case, those ones, they are more powerful, but they do cost more. They're a little bit more limited in how you can attach conveyor systems to them. They are a little bit more space saving, which I liked. But again, just in terms of the actual parts, they were significantly higher in cost than a standard fusion reactor. And on top of, all these modifications also meant a lot of plumbing changes. Using some of these advanced conveyor tubes really does help out a lot in this respect, because then it gives me a few more options in terms of just conveyor, straight tube, or corner. And as you can see, we're going forward, I'm using them a lot more, and I really do like them. So there's the one mod that I did sort of do a review on. It is included in there, and I'll also be a link to it. Just gives you a lot more really what I would consider useful options in terms of plumbing, so you can kind of make it look a little neater, make it look a little nicer. Raven Knight, who's building our station, Loves them, and he's used them extensively throughout the construction of the station that we're attached to. I've also been using them extensively in the Sevastopol, and we've also been using them on a lot of our smaller ships too, because they do have the small conveyor options. Again, T's and 5 points and 6 points, 4 points are all great, and they do help a lot. So taking a step away from the Sevastopol, and still sort of working on it indirectly, I came up with the idea of a probe that does my grinding for me on the Sevastopol, because those arms were unstable. I've tried them in a couple of different sort of configurations, and they just didn't work as well as I'd hoped. So the next option was, let's go with some remote control drones. So I started designing a remote control drone that could attach to the Sevastopol, do the grinding, grabbing, capturing of loose material, whatever you want to do it, do a little bit of recovery on its own. As you can see, it's going to have a grinder on the front, and take care of take care of that. Gives me a lot more flexibility if it's not actually attached to the ship, because the Sevastopol, being as big as it is going to have a lot of mass, and that means a lot of energy and or effort for the engines to move, and that doesn't mean it's going to be very quick. Tried a couple of, just space physics, right? Thrust to weight ratio. To really get it nimble would require a great deal of power and or engines, and since this is a survival game, we do have to keep one eye on our resources, specifically uranium. I don't want to be too inefficient. That could lead to problems down the road, or it's going to end up just being very, very difficult to keep going, right? We do build up a lot more of our energy reserve thanks to Drayden. He does mine out a great deal of resource for us, and we've also got Albin sort of building up some of our materials stockpiles as well. And there's always the ships that we've been capturing. If we can capture the reactors intact, they usually have uranium in them too, which is great. Nevertheless, you got to be careful, right? You can't consume more than you need. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to be using this probe for the most part on battery power, but I do a little reactor on it just initially to get it moved over to our sort of docking area, so that I can hook it up to the docking collar, allow it to charge its battery there off the station. Just kind of naming it here. This is also one of the first times I've ever tried to really get to use the remote control feature in Space Engineers, trying to control something remotely. So it's a bit of a learning curve for me here. I understand the principles of it, I understand the parts you need, and I got this sort of set up. It did take me a few iterations of this sort of design to get something that I really did like, because I wanted this thing to kind of connect to other probes just like it, so I could have them stream in a line. That way I could have more grinders focused on something it was chasing or consuming. And as you can see here, I forgot the gyroscope. Oops! Stuff happens. Anyway, and this, again, I wanted to basically give it a lot of options for connectivity. Now, to keep them slim and fairly cheap in terms of cost as well, because I want to basically bang them out quickly if I lose one. I want them to be disposable. So as you can see here, I'm just taking control of it. But with those criteria for the probes, that also meant I had to kind of come up with some interesting ideas to work with it. And again, a lot of these things are ideas that start off as one iteration and then get developed further as, limitations or issues pop up. Then I redesign or reconsider, think about more. And eventually I end up with something that I want, or something that'll do the job. Either way, that's ultimately what we're going after. So we're getting a little bit more complete. As you can see, this is iteration number 1 of my probe, and I'm just kind of doing a quick test of its capabilities and maneuverability, make sure that it works. I'm going to go park my butt in a seat, because whenever you're remote controlling, a good tip is to always be parked in a seat. That way your suit doesn't run out of energy while you're remoting. I've seen that happen a couple of times to people I know, people I've played with, totally. And I'm just going to go over here and bug Drayden for a minute. He was working on his combat ship, the Sulaco he's calling it. It's a large ship. We're calling it a destroyer, basically because it's designed to put a lot of punishment straight down on a target. But I figured since he was working on it, this was a perfect opportunity to go harass him with the probe. As you can see, I've got cameras on the front and back, and I was playing around with some other ideas, seeing if I could use 2 remote blocks on a ship and see if that helped change the controls around. Didn't work as well as I'd hoped. It only turns out that 1 remote block is really the best sort of configuration you can do. The idea was to have 1 remote block on the top and 1 remote block on the bottom facing the opposite direction, so if I needed to change my control scheme, then I could do it easily. And I think I smashed into the Sulaco when I was fooling around and kind of agitated Drayden a little bit here. Anyway, he's telling me to piss off. I'm sure. Anyway, we've captured another mining ship, and I've been using it just kind of off and on as a test for this grinding probe. Just making sure everything works. And you got to keep in mind, whenever you're remote controlling, the only real perspective you have is any cameras you put on it. You can't go into third-person mode and look around it like you can when you're piloting something, which can be a bit of an issue if you're bumping into things, or you're trying to maneuver it around tight areas, like in the insides of the ship, for example. However, the probe works, and the probe is working well enough, and it's a good sort of retrieval system. It's going to work better than those arms I created. This was I just kind of needed the flexibility of a small ship to really do the grinding, and honestly, nothing beats just a sheer metric ton of grinders when you need to consume something quickly. So building these probes to kind of track down and capture stuff, be able to do some light recovery, really helped out. And here's just a sort of panoramic or a view around the Sulaco, and it's more or less finished state, using some of the mods and things like that we've got. Like, there's got laser turrets there, and sniper cannons, and missile launchers, and all that fun stuff. It does get updated as it goes here, and here's Drayden, the pilot and builder, and again, he's probably still annoyed at me for ramming into it with the probe. Nevertheless, we decided to take her out for a boot and go for a test. Now, I am not in a ship right now. I'm just out in a space with my jetpack, and this is the aftermath of the Sulaco. I think one volley. I was like, dang. Good hit. Took out everything that would fight, and most of the cargo containers are intact, and the reactors are intact, and it's still got power in some places. So, I mean, it's not bad considering, it's not a very big ship, and you just kind of threw a metric ton of ammunition at it in terms of sniper rifle. 4 sniper rifles hitting a ship is generally pretty powerful. In my opinion, maybe a little bit overpowered. Nevertheless, some of the weapons we can start getting into a little bit later do trump all the vanilla stuff, so all the vanilla cargo ships and things tend to not stand a chance against us. And now the Sulaco's coming in to try to use one of our maglock plates to recover what's left of this ship, and as you can see there, he hit his dampers a little too early. I'm floating around in the trying to guide him in, because right now we're still, like I said, the Sulaco, this is the first iteration of it as well in its combat state. So he's got just the 2 tractor beams on the back, quote unquote, to try to capture things, and that means he has to match speeds with it in reverse, which can be a little tricky perspective wise. Nevertheless, we're getting close, and we just have to get close enough to get a mag lock on some chunk of it. Keep in mind, this is at 2 times speed as well, so it seems a little faster. There we go, he got it, and now he's just bringing it to a stop. And any other little bits go flying by. There's a piece of the antenna. I don't think we're going to end up getting that. But yeah, we got it. So he's got a pretty good catch. Our piracy is working very well. Enjoying it, having fun with it. And yeah, full stop, and then we can head back to base. And I'm just going to hop in here. He's got 5 seats because he's got some he can use some turret gunners and things like that as well. So this is a cool little ship. I like it. I like the way aesthetically it looks too. And now we're just going to haul it back to the boneyard and leave it there until we recover it, or reclaim all the material that's in it. Probably should have ground out the reactors on it first and taken power off it, just so that there's no way it's fighting. So back at the Sevastopol, those grinding arms didn't work, so they're getting recycled. I'm using my probes, my recovery probes, to do it. And as you can see there, even now they still kind of bounce around funny and are a little awkward to work with, because the sensors I put on them they detected whatever was close to it and tried to turn off the rotor, but then the rotor would just kind of let it free fall, and it just, whenever I was out of range, it would turn back on and just wasn't working. So as soon as I turned it off, then it was okay. I probably could have played with the rotor brake torque to fix some of that, but again, was not happy with the system. It was too unstable, so I wasn't going to spend a whole bunch more time trying to tweak it. I decided to go with the probes things. And so the aft section of the Sevastopol now will house the probes. Now, here we are just coming back to it. Now, when I was building this, rotors had changed. Keen had made some changes to them so that you couldn't use the merge block trick to connect two of them together anymore. But they did allow you to attach and detach the rotor part. So now this was an idea for me to try to get two rotors on it. Again, just to try to create some of that stability. Where I used a piston to raise up between two rotor parts, and then I would attach them both. Limited success. It worked, but it didn't work well enough, because what ended up happening was one side would get off center, and so the door was off kilter, and just, you know, you couldn't line anything up straight with it. I would like to see at some point for Keen Software to make some kind of a dummy rotor, or just like a bearing that you could detach a rotor to, so you have one powered rotor and then just a bearing that rotates, so you could have that stability that I did like, because the front door has it. The second door had it too, but it had a bit of a, when I took it out for a test drive, I had a bit of a break in it, and I had to take it apart to fix it again, and then I couldn't put it back the way I had it, and that kind of sucked in a lot of ways, and I was a little choked. So I had to end up basically putting the Bombay doors on hold for a little bit, just because I had to wait for something to fix them, or something to come out that, or some kind of technique that could be used to improve them. So anyways, this trick did work, although it didn't work well enough for my taste. I ended up just kind of accepting the fact I was only going to get one rotor on each door, and then using maglock surfaces to hold the door in place while the ship is moving, because ultimately the movement is what destroys these things. There's too much impact or whatever. However, that being said too, I did pleasantly find out later that rotors stability has been improved in the last little weeks too. So in my case, because the door wasn't too big, I was able to get away with just using one rotor, and as long as I don't have any brakes on the front door, it should be fine. But yeah, this sort of did work, but it did get off strange. It did get strange at one point and just stopped working properly. Alright. Nevertheless, if you guys want to give it a shot, go by all means. If you get it to improve, let me know. I'm curious to see, you know, exactly what we can get out of it. But, you know, at least now I can finish the Bombay doors that I wanted for dropping my fighters out of the front of the ship. Because that was bugging me for a little while. And I really did want to finish it. On a side note, there was a really interesting post by Merrick Rosa, the developer of Space Engineers. He basically stated that exploration was coming, and that pretty soon we wouldn't be kind of stuck in our static, you know, 4 asteroid, 16 asteroid worlds that we've been kind of stuck with. There'd actually be a point to go somewhere, and and they wanted to populate that with ships and stations and various other things that are, a lot of it is player driven and player created. Now I think some of this stipulations where you couldn't have any mods to create these ships and things like that, but if you were interested, then all you had to do was upload it to the Steam workshop, and they would review them and use some of the better selections that they felt were best to put in the world. There has been some, what I would consider, annoying issues brought up with regards to compensation when people are putting this stuff out there for free, and then Keen goes and turns it into their game and they're technically selling it. For me, I think that's horse crap. I really don't. You play this game to build stuff, and then you want to get paid for it as well. I'm sorry. You know, I've seen too much of that in the industry. I actually did not pursue a game development career simply because I kind of got really, I don't know, I guess the word is agitated by that kind of stuff. I don't like it. I do believe we, give credit where credit is due, but in a lot of ways it's like being a professional athlete. You're getting paid to play a game, and the reason that a professional athlete gets paid is because they generate revenue from the game, in terms of spectators and ticket sales and merchandise and what other crap that it may be. And I mean, I understand the business of it, but I still don't really like it. So, that being said, I mean, I can understand if you don't want your work being featured in a game, then don't put it out there for other people to use or to stuff like that, you copyright it. I mean, everybody wants to get paid, and I get that. I just get a kind of, I don't know. This is kind of a sticky topic for me because I don't really like gaming culture. The way the fanboys and stuff like that tend to treat game developers when things don't go smoothly or don't go their way. And, just kind of the very, I don't know, very juvenile attitude towards things in a lot of ways. And I get that a lot of those people that are probably putting those comments out there are very young and very inexperienced in the ways of life, but it's just one of those things that I don't like. That's why you'll never catch me playing Call of Duty or Battlefield anymore, especially if there's a voice chat, because I just cannot stand the despicable behavior that some of those people do online because they can get away with it. I don't know. I will stop there, though, because that's just me kind of ranting about it, and it's not really relevant to what we're doing here. I'm working on the Sevastopol's interior of the hangar now. I'm kind of finishing touches, catwalks, things like that to easily access the ship. The back of the Sevastopol now, I've decided after all I'm going to put a grind bed in it. So I asked my buddy, the dude here, to kind of cut out the top of it so I could put said grind bed in there. And also you're going to see a bunch of connectors back here now. Those are going to be where the probes, those grinding probes that I built, are going to be stored. So anyway, so as you can see here, we're just kind of digging it out and getting ready to go. And then I'll put a huge grind bed in there. And then I got a couple of ideas to put kind of a lowering mechanism on it to grab things and pull them into said grind bed. I decided to go with the top of this ship after doing the probe idea because the probes, it's a little bit easier just with the profile of the ship for me to come in under something and grab it rather than to go over top of it, because the nose of the ship now with the fighter bay in there hangs a lot lower and might be a little awkward. So I decided I was going to get this grind bed built up, and then I was going to put a piston with a grab boot or something like that in there to grab something, raise the piston up, grab something, then slowly lower it down into the bed to be consumed. And we'll get a little bit more into that right now. As you can see, this is the first iteration of the grind bed. I have my buddy kind of doing all the work in his grindhouse utility ship that he calls. He's got a great big skull on the bottom of it, which I found kind of hilarious, that he painted into it. Kind of likes doing things like that, and I'm all for things like that, so cool. It's cool. So anyways, back to the exploration. It really will be interesting game-wise to actually have a place to go with a ship, or to kind of point your ship in a direction and find random stuff, kind of like the way the world in Minecraft did. And I'm really looking forward to that feature. I don't know if it'll be, 6 weeks or 6 months down the road, but apparently it's coming soon. So if you want any of your content in there, just make sure it's on the Steam Workshop. And, try to get some people interested in it, because I'm assuming they'll probably use the more popular ones as we'll have a better chance of getting in there. So this, I put a little seat on the top of the ship just so that I could try using a piston to bring stuff down. It's got a magnetic locker on the front of it, and it seemed to work pretty good initially. As you can see here, we're pulling down a utility ship that the dude had made but decided he didn't really like after the fact, so it's basically being recycled into its componentary pieces. And I'm kind of liking the way this is working. It seems relatively stable, even though it's on a piston. And it just seems like, this might be a really good solution for what we're doing. Just kind of eyeballing it. It's still not super fast, but at the same time, it's probably the fastest solution I could come up with without getting highly mechanical in terms of pistons and rotor usage. Which, as you've seen in some of my attempts, can generate a bit of instability, or a little bit of instability that can be problematic. Nevertheless, you notice that the ship is actually right to the pistons maglock plate. That was because the dude, when he parked it, didn't realize that he could be a little ways away. And you're seeing some little bits breaking off of it, and that's probably because of the piston's pressure on the grinders. I don't expect any system to be 100% perfect or efficient, but again, that is something that is a bit of a concern to me, is I don't want to have something that's just wasting or losing parts because it keeps smashing things. Plus, this is a small ship, so there's a lot of heavy little blocks on it that it's consuming, as you can see, and right now there's only like 1 or 2 grinders still going in its current state. But as some of it get knocked down, some of it gets broken off, it starts to bounce around a little bit. This could be a bit of a concern for me. So again, just kind of watching it, keeping an eye on it to see where we go with there. Now the plan was to be able to raise this piston and grab the grinding thing that we were doing again and pull it down a little bit more. As you can see here, I let go of it, and then it kind of went a little crazy. I think that's because when I let go of it, there's a little bit of pressure on it from the grinders, and it kind of flung it up a little bit. Plus, it broke off a few more pieces, and then when I tried to grab something with the arm, I might have grabbed a piece of debris instead of the actual ship. So anyways, bringing it down again, I grabbed it, hauled it down, trying to keep an eye on it. I probably should have put the seat a lot closer, but anyway. As you can see, we moved the ship around a little bit just so that I could get an idea of where it was. And then I'm releasing it, raising, grabbing, pulling it down again. And as you can see, just because of the pressure, it's blowing pieces off. So this solution, and you can see sparks flying too. This, again, I wouldn't call it a complete success. It worked, but it didn't work well enough, unfortunately. And I don't know if that has anything to do with piston instability or instability with the mag plate or the mag grabber I was using. It's basically a mod that I'm using that has a tractor beam. It's like a flat piece that's really expensive to make, but it you know, it can grab things from a fair ways away, which is why I wanted to use it. It's like a long-range landing gear. So again, trying to lift up and then come down, and as you can see here, I've got the ship again, so I'm bringing it down one more time just to see what would happen, and just to see if I could finish consuming this and kind of get an idea of how much I lost. As you can see here, this is when things really kind of went weird. I put a lot of pressure on it. I noticed the pistons started doing some really weird stuff. And you got to remember, I'm the host, so I shouldn't be seeing sync issues, and it's just going crazy. And I'm like, oh snap! So I let go of the ship, and that went flying, but that didn't fix the piston. The piston just broke. I was like, oh man. So again, attempt number 3, 4, or 5 at this point, I'm not sure. Failed outright, more or less. Limited success at best. And that's where I'm going to end this video, because I eventually work on this problem some more and we go from there. So this is Scott Cook signing off. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.